Okay, now we're going to do a rewriting exercise that allows you to look at the structure of your one act in one glance. Rewriting can feel a little bit like pulling the string on a sweater and watching everything fall apart. So this exercise is meant to break things down so that you can, with one glance, look at the whole picture and figure out how to change and move things from there. This is one of those exercises where I'm going to ask you to pause this video so that you can complete the actual writing part of it. The first thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to get 9 card-sized pieces of paper. They don't have to be exactly card size, but you want them small enough that you're going to be able to lay them out and look at them all in a glance, but large enough that you can actually write stuff on them. So go ahead and do that now. 9 card-sized pieces of paper. The next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is just number them in a corner from 1 to 9. On each of these, I'm going to have you writing things. So this exercise is only as useful to you as you're able to be honest with yourself and as you're able to separate yourself from what you want to be in the play that you wrote and what is actually there. So try to be honest about what's actually on the page. It might help to have your play right next to you or near you so you can refer back to it. If I ask you to write something on a card that seems somehow inapplicable, or that you're not sure how to answer that question, just leave that card blank. That will be good information for you as well. On the first card, I'm going to ask you to describe your protagonist, your primary character or characters, the external characteristics, who they are, maybe what they do, anything you think it's important to know about the external characteristics of your protagonist. Go ahead and pause the video to do that. On card number 2, I'm going to have you describe the world or worlds of your play. Whatever you think it's important about the world of the play. Time and place, historical period, whether it's real or imaginary, single or multiple dimensions, anything that's important to know about the world of your play. On card number 3, I'm going to have you describe your antagonist. So describe whatever your opposing forces. That can be another character or characters, it can be some other non-human force, whatever gets in the way of your protagonist and creates the dramatic tension in the play. Describe that in card number 3. In card number 4, I'm going to have you describe the deeply buried feelings, fears, obsessions, psychological issues of your protagonist, whatever sort of deeply internal thing that inhibits them from getting what they want. These are not necessarily things that the protagonist has to know are inhibiting them. So your protagonist doesn't have to know about these forces, but you as the playwright know about them and describe them on card number 4. On card number 5, you're going to describe the super objective, the primary motivation of your protagonist. What do they want more than anything? On card number 6, you're going to describe the inciting event, the thing that happens that causes the rest of the play to happen. Whatever upsets the balance of the status quo, forces the protagonist into action, the thing that happens that starts the play. On card number 7, I'm going to ask you to list all of the events that happen in your play between your inciting event and what you would consider sort of the climax or the most important action. So everything that happens in the play between those two things, you're just going to make a list of all those events on card number 7. On card number 8, describe the turning point of the action, so the climax essentially, what brings everything to a head or causes a reversal. And finally, on card number 9, you're going to describe what the world is like at the end of the play. If there's a new balance, what is that? Is it different from the world at the beginning of the play? What is the differences? Is there a new balance that is hinted toward? What is that new balance? Describe that on card number 9. Now that you have got all of this described verbally on all these different cards, I'm going to ask you to find some space on a table, on the floor, and lay them out in this relationship. Your protagonist, card number 1, goes in the center, and you can see where all of these go around it. Looking at this layout, you may notice something about it. You may notice that it looks a little bit like a tarot reading. And that is actually exactly what it's based on. This exercise is called the tarot exercise. It was created by Susan Zeder. Susan was getting a tarot reading one day, and she realized that the relevance of a reading comes not in a single meaning or message, but in the sense that the questioner makes of the many meanings and the relationships of the cards. And when she realized this, she realized that this is the same way that an audience makes meaning in a play. It's not some single meaning or message, but all the sort of meanings and relationships of the different structural elements of the play help an audience to read it. She also noticed that the relationship between the individual places of the cards and the whole reading was really similar to the relationship between the individual structural elements and the whole experience of a play, and whether that experience was satisfying. So I put up here, and you can see the similar relationships between a tarot reading and the structural elements of a play, if any of you are avid tarot readers. So I want to break this down and look at the relationships to see how your play is functioning and how it can function better. This is the first relationship, the relationship between cards 1, 2, and 3. This is the primary conflict of the play. The tension between the protagonist, the antagonist, and the world creates this conflict and fuels the action and the atmosphere of the rest of the play. This is your core. So when you're looking at this, the question you want to ask yourself is, in what you've written here, do you see conflict, tension in the relationship here? If not, you might want to think about whether you've identified the correct character as your protagonist, or you might want to think about that you might need to intensify your antagonistic force somehow. Also ask yourself, when you're looking at this, is this the core of the play that you've actually written? Is this the core of the play that you wanted to write? And if it's not, you can ask yourself, where did the force go wrong and get lost, and how can I adjust or shift the forces between these three parts of a play in order to get closer to my intention? The next relationship I want to look at is the internal conflict of your protagonist, the spine of your protagonist. The conscious desires and motivations of your protagonist are in conflict with the unconscious forces that inhibit or restrain a character. So looking at these desires and your general external appearance of the protagonist, is there tension between those two things and the unconscious? Is that an understandable and relatable tension? Does it make sense? Would this believably drive your character to the action that you've written in your play? If not, what you really want to do is go back to your protagonist and do some more in-depth character work on them. Now let's look at the relationship between cards 6, 2, 1, and 7. This is the rising action, the chain reaction, the actual movement and action of your play. The inciting incident causes a chain reaction between the protagonist and the world, which forces all these events to happen. The question you want to ask yourself is there a connection between cause and effect here? Are these events, does it make sense looking at this list of events? If not, you want to think about maybe upping the stakes, making the world more important, or you can also ask yourself, is there another connection that's driving this play? Maybe this play isn't driven by action, but is there a connection here that makes some kind of sense in this sort of major action of the play? The next relationship that I want to look at is the rising action building to climax, and that's cards 1, 7, 5, and 8. The dramatic action builds to a climax as the need intensifies for the protagonist to achieve their greater objective. Is there a relationship here between the primary motivation of your protagonist and the climax? Does it make sense? Also, does the climax or the big turning point or reversal make sense based upon the action of the rest of the play? Look at that and think about that. And then the final relationship that I want to take a look at in these cards is the relationship between cards 8, 1, 3, and 9. This is the falling action, to resolution. The climax causes the final and ultimate confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist, which results in some action that brings about a resolution or button for the audience. There should be some velocity here. It should pick up speed. It should make sense. There should be some intensity and tension in here. And then the other question you want to ask yourself is, does this outcome seem inevitable, or at least make sense based upon the relationship of these other cards? So looking at the whole play in summation, the strength of the conflict can be seen in the degree of tension between cards 1, 2, and 3. The inner conflict of your protagonist is reflected in the interplay of cards 4, 1, and 5. The velocity of rising action is indicated in the intensity of tension between cards 6, 2, 1, and 7. The climax and reversal are driven by the chain of events, motivated by the need of the protagonist to achieve their objective, as seen in the interaction between 1, 7, 5, and 8. And finally, the inevitability of the resolution depends upon the collision course set up by the interaction of cards 8, 1, 3, and 9. Taking a look at this in toto, in sum, in whole, is this the play you intended to write? Does this play work? Does it make sense? And if not, what do you do? Well, here's the next step. Pick a card that's blank or in which you identified an issue and pull it out of your reading. You're going to rewrite that card to match your intention or to fix the issue that you saw, and then put it back into your reading and see how that changes things, how that makes it different, if it makes it better, if it scans better. And then the hard part. Once you've got that figured out, you know which card you need to fix. Look at your play and decide what needs to change to address that. Do you need to add a scene, delete a scene, change a major event, change in your character's development or desire, strengthen your antagonist? And then you can get into your play and start trying to tweak it a little bit to match the changes in your overall tarot reading. In general, I'd also love to know if there were any surprises or questions, thoughts, or discoveries that happened as you were doing this exercise. And I'm going to ask you to please share those on the discussion board.